Princess Alara stood at the edge of the spaceport, her gaze fixed on the world she had left behind so many years ago. It had been a long time since she last saw her home. She had been just a child when she was sent to a distant world for safety, far away from the dangers that had come to her people. Now, as an adult, she was returning not as a girl full of dreams and hope, but as a princess. With the weight of her people's future on her shoulders, the war had changed everything. Her once peaceful planet had been torn apart by battles that left scars not just on the land, but on the hearts of the people. She could still remember the day she left, the final hug from her mother, and the tear-filled goodbye to her closest friend, Ethan. Ethan had been her childhood friend, the one person who understood her better than anyone else. Together, they spent days running through the gardens of the palace, talking about the future, playing games, and dreaming of a world without war. But that world had been shattered by the alien invasion, and she had been sent away, far from the danger, while Ethan stayed behind. She had lost contact with him after that. No messages, no letters, no word about what had happened to him. It was as if he vanished into thin air. As Alara stepped off the shuttle, the sight of her home planet filled her with a mix of emotions. The palace, once a shining beacon of hope, now looked dark and weathered. The streets she had once walked as a child were now filled with soldiers, refugees, and the cries of a war-torn city. But it was the people's faces that struck her the most. There was fear in their eyes. But there was also something else, hope. They had hoped that their princess would return and restore peace to their world. Alara was greeted by her royal advisors, who quickly escorted her to the palace. The journey had been long, and her mind raced with thoughts of the people she had left behind. The soldiers in the streets spoke in hushed tones, their faces hard and tired. She knew that many of them had fought in the war, but she didn't understand how far it had gone or who had played the most crucial roles in it. The one name she couldn't stop thinking about was Ethan, her childhood friend, the boy who had always been by her side. It wasn't until she entered the royal chambers that she learned of his involvement in the war. Princess Alara, one of the advisors, said, bowing as she entered, "We have much to discuss, but first, you should know about the hero who saved us all, the human soldier, Ethan. He led a group of warriors that turned the tide of the war in our favor." Alara's heart skipped a beat. Ethan, hero, she could hardly believe it. The boy she once knew as a playful friend was now a hero who had fought in the war. But there was no time to question the details. Her advisors explained that Ethan had become the leader of a special human force, chosen for their bravery and strength. He had led several successful missions, saving the lives of countless civilians and soldiers. His efforts were said to be the reason the war was now in its final stages. Despite the praise, Alara's thoughts were consumed with confusion. She remembered Ethan as a kind, innocent boy. He had been gentle, loving, and full of wonder. How could that boy have grown into the leader of a military unit? It didn't make sense. Still, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The name of the hero, Ethan, was becoming more familiar to her. She had seen his face before, but it was only now, after hearing the stories, that she understood the man he had become. But there was something else that unsettled her. After all these years, why hadn't anyone told her about him? Why hadn't she heard of his accomplishments, his pain, and his struggle? Had he chosen to stay hidden? Or was it because of her royal status that her people didn't want her to know? There was a need to find him. Alara had to know more. She had to see him, speak to him, and understand what had happened to him in all the years they had been apart. She couldn't let the memories of their childhood slip away without knowing the man he had become. Her thoughts were interrupted by another advisor, who informed her that Ethan was not just a hero, but a mystery to many. After the war, he had disappeared from public life. No one knew where he had gone, and no one had been able to contact him. Some believed he had retreated to the farthest corners of the galaxy, unwilling to face the praise and the burden of his past. Others claimed that he had left to heal from the trauma of war. But wherever he was, one thing was certain: Ethan was no longer the boy she had once known. Alara made a decision. She would find Ethan, no matter the cost. She had to know the truth about what had happened to her childhood friend, the weight of her duty as princess, and her curiosity about Ethan's fate drove her to take action with a new resolve. Alara set out to find the man who had once been her closest friend, and in doing so, she would uncover not only the story of a hero, but also the story of a boy who had never left her heart. Alara's mind raced as she stood by the palace window, gazing at the city below. The more she learned about Ethan, the more confused and curious she became. The advisors had told her about his role in the war, his heroics, and the way he had led his troops to victory, but there were so many unanswered questions. How did the boy she had known transform into this powerful and fearless leader? Was he still the same Ethan, the one she had once shared her childhood dreams with? Her thoughts were interrupted when one of the palace servants knocked softly on her door and entered, holding a small folder in her hands. "Princess, there's something you need to see," she said, handing Alara the folder. The papers inside were filled with reports, photographs, and records of Ethan's service during the war. As Alara carefully flipped through the papers, her eyes widened. Ethan's name appeared over and over again. He was the leader of a special forces unit known as the Earth Warriors, a group of soldiers selected from Earth's best and bravest. The reports detailed how they had fought in the most dangerous battles, taken on the toughest enemies, and brought hope to worlds that had almost given up. Each mission was a success, but it came at a cost. Many of Ethan's soldiers didn't make it out alive. The faces of those soldiers stared back at her from the photographs, young men and women, some no older than she had been when she first left her planet. There was one particular report that caught her attention. It was an account of a critical battle that had taken place just months before the war ended. The enemy had launched a surprise attack on one of Alara's closest allies, and it looked like defeat was certain. But then, Ethan's forces arrived, led by him, according to the report. It was Ethan's brilliant tactics and sheer determination that had turned the tide. His actions not only saved thousands of lives, but also secured a victory that led to the final defeat of the enemy. Alara's heart swelled with pride, but also with sadness. She hadn't realized the extent of Ethan's sacrifice. He had become a hero, but at what cost? The papers spoke of his courage, his leadership, and his intelligence. But they also hinted at something darker. There were references to his struggles after the war, to the way he had withdrawn from public life. It seemed that Ethan, despite his fame and honor, was a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He had lost so many friends during the war, and it was clear that the memories haunted him. The report suggested that Ethan had never truly recovered from the trauma he had experienced. Alara closed the folder slowly, her mind swirling. Ethan had become a legend, but in the process, he had changed in ways that she couldn't fully understand. He wasn't the boy she had grown up with. He was a warrior, a leader, and yet, he was also a man broken by the very war he had won, determined to find him. Alara gathered her things and made her way to the palace gates. She had heard rumors that Ethan had taken refuge in a small village far from the capital, away from the eyes of the public. It was said that he had been living in isolation, hiding from the fame that had followed him since the war ended. The journey to the village took several days, and the landscape changed as Alara traveled farther from the palace. The once vibrant cities were replaced by quiet towns, and the air grew heavier with the weight of the past. Along the way, Alara spoke with the locals, but no one knew exactly where Ethan was. They all spoke of him with a mix of respect and sorrow, as if they too knew that the hero was not the man he once was. Finally, after a long journey, Alara arrived at the village. It was small, with dirt roads and simple homes. The people here lived quiet lives, far removed from the battles of the galaxy. She was told that Ethan had been seen in the area, but no one could give her an exact location. She would have to search for him herself. As Alara walked through the village, she felt the eyes of the people on her. The princess was a symbol of hope for her planet, and yet, here in this quiet corner of the world, she was just another traveler. No one seemed to recognize her, and that gave her a sense of peace. She wasn't the princess here, she was just a woman looking for an old friend. It wasn't long before she found a small house at the edge of the village. It was modest, with a few plants growing in the yard. There were no signs of life, but something about the place felt familiar. Alara stood in front of the door, unsure of what to do next. She hadn't prepared for this moment. What would she say to him? How could she bridge the gap between the childhood memories she held and the man who had become a hero? She knocked on the door, her heart pounding in her chest. For a moment, there was silence. Then the door creaked open, and Alara found herself face to face with a man she had never expected to see. It was Ethan. But he was different. His face was worn and tired, and his eyes held a deep sadness. The man who had once been full of life and laughter now seemed like a shadow of his former self. He didn't recognize her at first, and Alara could see the hesitation in his eyes as he tried to place her. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice rough and weary. Alara took a deep breath and stepped forward. "It's me, Ethan," she said softly. "It's Alara." For a moment, there was nothing. Then his eyes widened. In shock and recognition flickered across his face. "Alara," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Is it really you?" The princess nodded, her heart aching at the sight of the man she had once known so well. Ethan stood there for a long time, his eyes scanning her face as if trying to make sense of the reality in front of him. Slowly, he stepped aside and let her in. As Alara entered the small home, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the years that had passed. The home was simple, with few belongings, and it smelled of dust and old memories. It was clear that Ethan had been living in solitude, far from the world that had once praised him as a hero. "I never thought I'd see you again," Ethan said quietly as they sat down. "Not after everything that happened." Alara looked at him, her heart full of questions. "I never stopped thinking about you," she replied softly. "You were my best friend, Ethan, and now I see you as a hero. But that's not all you are. What happened to you after the war?" Ethan sighed deeply, his eyes clouded with memories he wasn't ready to face. "The war changed everything," he said quietly. "It wasn't just the battles, Alara. It was the lives lost, the people who depended on me, the responsibility. I never asked for it, but in the end, I had to do what I had to do. And now, I don't know who I am anymore." The quiet village was unlike any place Alara had ever visited. It felt far removed from the bustling palace, the constant reminders of duty and royalty. Here, in the small house on the outskirts, Alara felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Peace. But it was a peace that came with the heavy burden of uncertainty. She had found Ethan, but the man before her was not the boy she had known. How could he be? The war had changed everything, and Alara couldn't help but feel the weight of his experiences, of the man he had become. As she sat in the small, modest room with Ethan, they exchanged glances, both unsure how to bridge the years of silence between them. The memories of their childhood seemed so distant now, like a different lifetime. Ethan had been a hero, but that hero was still a man broken by the cost of war. Alara could see it in his eyes, the weight of loss, of trauma, and the burden of decisions that had shaped his life. Ethan broke the silence. "I don't know how to explain what happened to me, Alara," he said quietly, his voice rough and distant. "The war, it changed everything. I wasn't prepared for what it did to me. To my mind, I didn't ask for the hero's title. But when the enemy attacked, when everything was falling apart, I couldn't walk away." Alara listened carefully, her heart aching for him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the hurt that ran deeper than the physical scars he carried. "You did what you had to do," she said softly. "You saved so many lives. I've heard the stories. You're a hero, Ethan." Ethan's lips twisted into a bitter smile. "A hero? Maybe. But I don't feel like one. I feel like I've lost myself. I don't know who I am anymore." He looked away, staring out the window as if seeking something beyond the walls, something far away. Alara reached out, gently placing her hand on his. "You're still you, Ethan. I know it's hard, but I want to help you remember. You don't have to carry this alone. Ethan's eyes softened for a moment, but he quickly withdrew. I can't go back, Alara. I've seen things, done things, that I can't forget. And maybe I don't want to. I don't want anyone to look at me like I'm still that young, innocent boy you knew. I'm not him anymore. Alara's heart tightened. You may not be the same, but I'm still your friend. I always will be. She paused, her mind racing. Do you know why I came here, Ethan? It wasn't just to see you again. It was because I couldn't believe that the man who saved the galaxy could be so far away from everything he's fought for. I want to understand what happened to you, what the war did to you. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, his fists clenched at his sides. The war was never just about battles or victories, he whispered. It was about survival, and it tore us all apart. I led soldiers into the heat of battle, made decisions I never thought I'd have to make. I watched my friends die, and I couldn't save them. How do you live with that? Alara sat in silence, her heart aching. She didn't have the answers, but she knew one thing for sure: Ethan was carrying a pain much greater than anything she could ever understand. He had fought not just for victory, but for survival, for those who couldn't fight for themselves. And now, he was alone, struggling with the weight of it all. I didn't come here to judge you, Ethan, Alara said softly. I came because I care about you. You were my friend once, and you're still my friend now. I know it's not easy, but I want to help you find a way to heal. Ethan met her gaze, his eyes filled with uncertainty. I don't know if I can heal, Alara. What if I can't go back to who I was? What if I'm broken beyond repair? Alara took a deep breath. We all change, Ethan. But that doesn't mean we can't find a way forward. You're not alone in this. I'm here, and I'll stay with you for as long as it takes. Ethan looked at her, the walls he had built around himself beginning to crumble. I don't deserve your kindness after everything I've done, everything I've seen. I'm not the man you remember. You don't have to be, Alara replied. Gently, I know you're not the same, but I believe there's still good in you, Ethan, and I want to help you find it again. For the first time, a faint smile tugged at Ethan's lips. You always were stubborn, he said, his voice softer now. But I think maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have to carry all this by myself. Alara nodded. You don't. You have me, and if you're willing, we can find a way to help you heal. But you have to be willing to take that first step. Ethan stood up slowly, looking around his small, quiet home. The walls, the furniture, even the silent soul of it felt like a prison. But it was a prison he had built for himself, a way to escape the memories that haunted him. Yet, standing before Alara, he felt something shift. Maybe it was the memories of their childhood, or maybe it was the realization that he didn't have to carry this burden alone. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope. I've never been good at asking for help, he admitted, but I'm willing to try. For you, Alara. Alara's eyes softened. That's all I need, Ethan. Just a chance. We'll take it one step at a time, together. As they stood there, facing each other, Alara felt a weight lift from her chest. It wouldn't be easy, she knew. Ethan's healing would take time, and there were still so many things he had to confront. But for the first time since her arrival, she felt a sense of peace. She was here for him, and together, they would find a way to move forward. Alara stayed with Ethan for the next few days, helping him with small tasks around his home and simply being there. The more they talked, the more she understood the depth of his struggle. He wasn't just a soldier. He was a man who had given everything for a cause, and in doing so, had lost himself. But Alara wasn't giving up on him. She couldn't, and slowly, she began to see small changes in Ethan. His smile, though still rare, was a little brighter. His laughter, though quiet, was a little more genuine. And though the road ahead would be long, Alara knew that with time, Ethan could begin to heal. It wasn't just about saving the galaxy anymore. It was about saving themselves, one step at a time. Days passed, and with each one, Alara could feel the distance between her and Ethan slowly closing. They spoke more, shared stories from their childhood, and began to rebuild the bond they once had. But while the conversations were comforting, They both knew that there was still so much left unsaid. Alara could see the hesitation in Ethan's eyes whenever they talked about the war. He still struggled with the weight of the past, the lives lost, and the impossible choices he had made. But she didn't push him. She simply stayed by his side, offering him the patience he needed. One morning, as Alara woke to the soft light of dawn streaming through the windows of Ethan's home, she noticed a change in the air. It wasn't just the peacefulness of the village or the birds chirping in the trees. It was something about Ethan. He had been quieter than usual the night before, and now he was sitting by the window, staring out at the rolling hills. Alara quietly approached him, sitting down beside him. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly, careful not to startle him. Ethan didn't immediately answer. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, as if searching for something far beyond the world in front of him. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and thoughtful. "I've been thinking about what you said," he replied. "About finding a way to heal?" Alara didn't interrupt. She simply waited, letting him speak when he was ready. "You know," he continued, "I've always believed that I had to keep going, that I couldn't stop. But now, I'm not so sure anymore." He looked at her then, his eyes searching. "I've been running from the past, from everything I've done, and maybe it's time to face it." Alara's heart swelled with hope. "Ethan, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here." Ethan let out a long breath and nodded. "I know. I don't think I can do it alone anymore. And maybe I shouldn't." Alara smiled softly. "You don't have to. You have me, and we'll take this one step at a time." The next few days were filled with small moments of discovery. Alara and Ethan spent their time together, talking about everything and nothing. Alara helped him with tasks around the house, simple things that required little effort, but offered a sense of normalcy. They went for walks through the village, and at night, they sat under the stars, sharing stories from their past. Slowly, Ethan began to open up more, and with each conversation, Alara could see the walls around his heart begin to crumble. But despite their progress, there was still something that lingered in the back of Ethan's mind. One afternoon, as they walked through the village, Alara noticed him growing quieter again. He kept glancing around as if searching for something, or perhaps avoiding something. "What's wrong?" Alara asked, her voice gentle. "You've been distant again." Ethan hesitated, then stopped walking. He turned to face her, his expression conflicted. "I need to show you something," he said. "It's time." Alara raised an eyebrow. "Show me what?" Ethan's voice was quiet, almost as if he were afraid of the answer. "I need to show you where it all happened, where the war changed everything for me." Alara's heart ached for him. She could see the pain in his eyes, the rawness of the memories that still haunted him. But she didn't hesitate. "Lead the way," she said, her voice steady. They walked together, leaving the village behind, heading toward a small, forgotten patch of land just outside the hills. Alara could see that Ethan was tense, his steps heavier than before. He was clearly apprehensive, as if every step brought him closer to something he didn't want to face. They reached a quiet clearing, surrounded by tall trees and overgrown grass. The air here was thick with silence, the kind of silence that seemed to weigh on the soul. Ethan stood still, looking at the ground for a long moment, before finally speaking again. "This is where I lost them," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Alara looked around, trying to understand. "Lost who?" "My team," Ethan replied, his voice filled with grief. "The ones who followed me into battle. The ones who believed in me." Alara's heart sank as she realized what he meant. This was the place where Ethan had fought his most difficult battle, the place where his closest friends had died. She could feel the pain in his voice, and she could only imagine the horrors he had seen. Without saying a word, she stepped closer to him, placing her hand gently on his arm. She didn't need to ask for more details. She could feel the weight of his memories pressing down on him, and she understood why he had never been able to let go. "I couldn't save them," Ethan said, his voice cracking. "They trusted me, and I failed them." Alara turned him to face her, her gaze unwavering. "Ethan, you didn't fail anyone. You did everything you could. No one could ask for more." Ethan shook his head, his expression torn. I couldn't protect them. I couldn't protect anyone. You don't need to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders, Ethan, Alara said softly. You did what you could. You're not alone anymore. Ethan's eyes were filled with tears, but he didn't let them fall. Instead, he nodded, slowly, as if he were beginning to believe her. Maybe you're right, he whispered. Alara smiled, the warmth of her expression filling the space between them. We're in this together. You don't have to face it all alone anymore. You have me. Ethan took a deep breath and looked out at the clearing, as if seeing it for the first time. The weight of the past still clung to him, but for the first time, Alara could see a flicker of hope in his eyes. He wasn't completely healed, not yet, but perhaps, just perhaps, he was finally ready to take the next step. The silence that had once been suffocating now felt peaceful. They stood together, side by side, the past still hanging between them, but no longer controlling them. It wasn't the end of his journey, but it was a beginning, and that was all they needed. Days turned into weeks, and the quiet village became a place where Alara and Ethan found some semblance of peace. It was a simple life, one far from the chaos of the war, and it gave them the space they needed to heal. Alara continued to stay by Ethan's side, and slowly, the walls he had built around himself started to crumble. His mood had lifted, and he had begun to talk more freely. Though the shadows of the past still haunted him, there was a spark of hope in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Ethan had agreed to face his past, but there was still so much left for him to confront. The healing process wasn't easy. It wasn't just about finding peace with what had happened, it was about learning to forgive himself, to believe that he was more than the man who had led soldiers into battle. Alara knew that this was a journey they would take together, but she also knew that the road ahead would not be without its challenges. One evening, as they sat on the porch of Ethan's small house, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Alara turned to him. How are you feeling? She asked, her voice gentle. Ethan leaned back in his chair, staring out at the vast open fields. Better, he said after a long pause. It's still hard to shake off the memories, but I'm learning to live with them rather than letting them control me. He looked at her, a small smile forming on his lips. I didn't think I could do it, but you've helped me see that there's more to life than just fighting. Alara smiled warmly, her heart swelling with affection for him. You've always been more than just a soldier, Ethan. You've always been someone who cared about others, who wanted to make a difference, and that hasn't changed. Ethan looked down at his hands, his fingers tracing the edge of his cup. I never saw myself as a hero, Alara. I was just trying to survive. I was just trying to do what needed to be done. Alara reached out, placing her hand over his. Surviving doesn't make you any less of a hero. You fought for what was right, and you saved lives. That's something to be proud of. Ethan was quiet for a long time, his gaze lost in thought. I'm proud of what I did, but it comes with a cost. I lost so many people along the way, people I cared about, people who trusted me, and every day, I wonder if I could have done more. You did all that you could, Ethan, Alara said softly. No one can ask for more than that. Ethan finally looked up at her, his eyes filled with emotion. I don't know how to live with that. Alara, I don't know how to move forward. When so many are still gone, how do you find peace with that? Alara's heart broke for him. She could see the weight of his pain, the doubt that still lingered. But she also knew that healing would take time, and she was willing to walk with him every step of the way. Healing doesn't happen all at once. It's a process, and sometimes it's about learning to live with the memories, not burying them. Ethan nodded slowly, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I don't know if I'll ever be the person I was before. I don't know if I can ever be that guy again. You don't have to be, Alara replied softly. You're not the same person, but that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've grown. You've learned things that have made you stronger, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. For the first time in a long time, Ethan's expression softened. I don't know what the future holds, Alara, but I know that I can't do this alone. I've spent so much time trying to fight my demons by myself, but now I see that I need help. I need people to stand by me." Alara smiled, a soft laugh escaping her lips. "You've always had me, Ethan. I'll never leave you, no matter what." They sat there in the fading light, the quiet of the village wrapping around them like a blanket. For the first time, Ethan felt a sense of peace. It wasn't a perfect peace, but it was a start. He had spent so long carrying the weight of his past, trying to fight his way through the memories and the pain, but with Alara by his side, he was beginning to see that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant moving forward, taking one step at a time, and knowing that it was okay to ask for help along the way. The next few days were filled with more conversations and moments of reflection. Ethan and Alara began to talk about the future, not just his future, but hers as well. They spoke about the possibility of returning to the palace, of rebuilding the kingdom that had been torn apart by the war. But the more they talked, the more Alara realized that her place was with Ethan, helping him heal and find his way again. She had her duty as a princess, yes, but she also had a duty to Ethan, the man who had once been her closest friend, the man who had become her partner. In a new, unexpected journey, one afternoon, Alara suggested they visit the nearby forest, a quiet, peaceful place that had always been special to her when she was a child. Ethan agreed, and together they walked into the woods, surrounded by towering trees and the sweet scent of pine. The forest was calm, the only sounds being the rustling of the leaves and the occasional bird song. As they walked deeper into the woods, Alara stopped at a small clearing, a place she remembered fondly from her childhood. She smiled as she looked around. "This is where I used to come when I needed to think," she said softly. "It always helped me find clarity." Ethan glanced around, taking in the peaceful surroundings. "It's beautiful here," he said, his voice filled with awe. "I can see why it meant so much to you." Alara nodded. "It's a place of healing, a place where I could escape the pressures of being a princess and just be myself." She turned to Ethan, her gaze soft and understanding. "Maybe we can find peace here, together. It's not just a place to escape, but a place to rebuild." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I think I've finally found a way to start healing, Alara, and I think I'm ready to face whatever comes next." Alara smiled, her heart full. "We'll face it together. Whatever the future holds, we'll face it side by side." The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the village. The peacefulness of the day seemed to echo the quiet steps that Ethan and Alara had taken together. Over the past weeks, they had come so far since their reunion, but both knew that the road ahead was still uncertain. Healing was a journey, and though the past still held its grip on Ethan's heart, there was a new hope in his eyes, a hope that he hadn't felt in a long time. As the days passed, Ethan began to embrace the idea of moving forward. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt, moments when the weight of his memories would come crashing down on him. But now, Alara was there to help him bear the load, and for the first time in years, Ethan felt like he wasn't carrying the burden alone. They had spent countless hours talking about the war, about their childhood, about their dreams for the future, but each conversation brought them closer to the truth. They both had a role to play in the future of their worlds, and they couldn't do it alone. One evening, after a long walk through the village, Ethan and Alara sat on the porch of Ethan's home, watching the stars twinkle above. The night was peaceful, with a soft breeze rustling the leaves of the trees. It was a quiet moment, but one that felt full of promise. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, his voice soft but steady. Alara turned to him, waiting for him to continue. "I've been running from my past for so long," he began, looking out at the stars. "But I think it's time to stop. Not forget it, but stop letting it control me." He paused, turning his gaze to Alara. "And I think it's time to face the future, no matter what it holds." Alara smiled gently. "I'm glad to hear you say that, Ethan. You've come a long way. You don't have to face anything alone anymore. Not the past, not the future, nothing." Ethan's expression softened, and for a moment, There was a flicker of the young man she had once known, the boy who had been full of dreams, full of hope. "I don't know what the future holds," he said quietly, "but I know one thing. I can't go back to who I was, and I don't want to." "You don't have to," Alara replied. "You've become someone even stronger, Ethan, and I believe in you. We'll take the next step together, no matter what comes." Ethan took a deep breath, his gaze steady. "I don't know what it looks like our future. I don't know if I'll ever be the man I was before, but I know that I want to find out with you by my side." Alara's heart warmed at his words. It wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about building something new, something better, a future where they could both be themselves, where they could support each other and face whatever challenges lay ahead. "I want that too," Alara said, her voice steady. "I'm here, Ethan. I'll always be here." They sat in silence for a few moments, simply enjoying the comfort of each other's presence. It was a quiet understanding, the kind that didn't need words, the kind that came from years of friendship, of shared memories, and of a deep, unspoken bond. After a while, Alara spoke again. "Ethan, I know you've been carrying the weight of the war for so long, but I want you to know something. You're not just a soldier. You're not just a hero. You're so much more than that." Ethan looked at her, his eyes soft but filled with uncertainty. "I don't know if I believe that." "I do," Alara replied firmly. "You've always been more than your role in the war. You've always been someone who cares about others, someone who can lead with compassion and strength. You just need to remember that." Ethan nodded, slowly, taking in her words. It wasn't easy to believe them, but he wanted to. He wanted to be more than the soldier who had fought in the war. He wanted to be the man who could live in peace, who could build a life, not just survive. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a sense of clarity. He wasn't sure where the future would take him, but with Alara by his side, he was willing to find out. "You've given me so much, Alara," Ethan said, his voice low but sincere. "You've shown me that there's still hope, and for the first time in a long time, I think I'm ready to build something new, not just for myself, but for us." Alara's smile widened, and she squeezed his hand. "We'll build it together, Ethan. Whatever it is, we'll face it side by side." The next day, they stood together in the village square, watching as the people went about their daily lives. The village had been quiet for so long, but now there was a sense of change in the air. There was a future ahead, one that was full of possibilities, and for the first time, Alara and Ethan felt like they were ready to embrace it. Ethan turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "What do we do now?" he asked. Alara smiled. "We start by living, by making choices that matter, by being who we are, not who the world wants us to be." Ethan nodded, his heart lighter than it had been in years. "I like that," he said. Quietly. And so, they began. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still many challenges ahead. But for the first time, they both understood that they didn't have to face it alone. They would take the steps together, each one bringing them closer to the future they were meant to build. Ethan had faced the darkness of war and the weight of his past, but with Alara by his side, he was ready to move forward. They would both learn to live, to love, and to heal, and in time, they would discover that even in the aftermath of the hardest battles, there could still be hope for a brighter tomorrow.